So just to get started again, welcome again to the live episode. We're going to get started here in just a couple of minutes. But the idea here is really just to do a Q&A. I know a lot of us out there that have been rocking with me for a while have questions, and I see the questions in the comments, and I read and respond to almost every comment. Now, I always say that it's difficult to get to every comment because it's once you leave the original comment, then there's always the sub comments and the replies, and it's hard to get to all of those replies. So I think that this is going to be a great opportunity for me to answer questions from you, and just to let you know what the setup is I have some questions that came in ahead of time that I'll cover some of those, but I have the live chat here, and so as I see questions in the chat, I'll go ahead and answer some of those questions. I think many of you out there know that when I answer a question, I give it to you honestly, and there's really not much that's off limits. There are some things I don't talk about because I think if you get too anchored in the particulars of any one person's circumstance, then it's probably going to either give you artificial hope or not give you any hope at all because you say, well, I'm not doing what this person did. But the idea is everybody has a particular circumstance that dictates their ability to retire and what that looks like for them. So, but again, I just ask everybody to, if you have questions, put them in the comments and we'll talk about them. And I'll try to go as long as I can to get to as many comments as I can. So enough about that. I think we're all set up now. So again, thank you. Welcome to the live episode. I'm Sabado. I retired at 51. I'm 53 now, so I retired in 2023, September 2023, and from a profession in human resources. And when I retired, it wasn't because I had millions of dollars sitting around. It was because I did a little bit of planning. And if you watch the episode I put out this morning, I talk about kind of coming from nothing and just building up after some pretty significant changes in my life. So I like to believe that if I'm able to do it and put together that discipline and the rigor to do it, then others should be able to do it. And it may not happen on the same time frame, but I think that if we put our mind to it, just about anything is possible because we've had some great things that have happened. So let's go ahead and get started with a couple of questions that came in prior. I'll start with one that came in this morning. One is the first one is, what are your thoughts on figuring out where you want to retire before you're retired? And, that's an interesting question because I think people a lot of times think that when you retire, you have to retire in the same place. Now, about, 8 years or so before I retired, my wife and we looked at the place that we were living at and realized that with my bad knees and just having to go up and down flights of steps, we didn't want that. And the cost of living where we were was a little bit more expensive. So we were able to move to another place. We sacrificed a little bit, moved to another town. That's a little bit of a smaller town, still a major city in California, but we moved to another town that was less expensive, was able to get a one-story house and move. I think that when you look at your particular circumstances, if you look at what the cost of living is and what your budget allows, I think that's really going to drive, in some cases, the place that you're able to retire. I was talking to one person in my Chats with Sabado series, and that he's looking at the Dominican Republic. And then I had somebody else say, the cost of healthcare. So again, you just have to balance the circumstance. I think it's important to take a look at the totality of your circumstance. And at the end of the day, it kind of comes down to what you can afford. You're not going to move from, let's say, Oklahoma to New York City where you have an incredibly higher cost of living if you can't afford it. But you just take a look at those things. Again, it's hard to give exact specifics because everybody's circumstance is different, but I do think it's important to take a look at where you're going to live before you retire. So that way, as you set up your budget, you can set up your budget around that cost of living. A question that just came in, the Sunny SSG, what's happening SSG? Thank you for or SS Gunny G. I just call you G. Thanks, G. Not to be mistaken for the other G that's on the channel, but it says, I'm sure you may have mentioned before, but which was more important to your decision, your amount of savings or your level of debt? That's an interesting question because I think when you look at debt is like compound interest in reverse. And so when you look at a person's net worth is all the money that they've saved and then all of the money that they owe. And the problem with debt, particularly credit card debt and revolving debt, is the amount that you owe continues to grow over time. And that doesn't just hurt you from the standpoint of growing your debt, but it also hurts you as your investments and the amount that you saved hedge against inflation. It's really important to understand that as inflation occurs, the value of companies continues to adjust. And one of the ways that you hedge against inflation is through investing. But if on the other side of the coin, you have something that's just pulling money away, then it doesn't, then number one, you're not going to grow as fast as you can grow. And number two, it's going to cause your costs in retirement to go up exponentially. So I would say that the first step would be to get out of debt to the degree that you can. Now, there's good debt and there's bad debt. I think things like owning a house, because that's an appreciating asset, I think that's a good idea. And I think there's sometimes necessary debts because, the reality is most of us don't have $50,000 in our pocket to go out and buy a car. But I think you have to really take a look at your debt, because if you don't, you may set yourself up where you can make those payments today. But remember, if you have a $100 credit card today and that's at a 20% interest rate, then next year that same $100 is going to cost you $120. And then if you take that inflation on top of that, then you're taking that other money and you're putting that on top of it. You see, so it's like compound interest working the other way. So I would have to say that, in my opinion, the level of debt. And one of the first things that I did when I went through some major changes was I looked at my level of debt to try to understand what my level of debt was and how do I get out of that. And what was interesting is once I took that debt away, I was able to take some of that money and put that money back into the markets. And that allowed me to continue to grow and put more money in and build a little bit of wealth a little bit faster. And I hate to say wealth because, again, I'm not rich. It's not that type of situation. But my point is I would rather take that money and save it and cut out what's in the debt, unless you're sitting on a 2%, 2 or 3% home loan, then you're in good shape because you could make more. And again, this is an argument that a lot of people have, but you could make more by taking that money and putting it into the market than you would putting it in your house. So you don't lock in a 3% interest rate where you can make 10% in the market. So there's a lot that sits around that, but I do want to thank you, SS Gunny G, better known as G, for the question, because I think it's a great I think that's a great question. Another question that I had was, do you have information to provide on your financial advisor? And the answer to that question is yes, I do. Now, what I try to do out of respect for my financial advisor, and because I know that everybody on YouTube, and I see it all the time, but everybody on YouTube doesn't have the best intentions, what I ask is that you send me an email and then I'll send you over his information. And he's with one of the bigger companies, so it's not anything where it's a scam or anything like that, but he's helped me. And what happens with the financial advisor, and what I think is really key with a financial advisor, is my financial advisor helps me understand things that I wouldn't otherwise understand. And so when let's say, for example, when the tariff conversation came around and the markets dipped, I called him and I asked the question, hey, should I panic right now? And he said, no, and here's why. When COVID happened and the markets dipped, I called him and said, should I panic? He said, no, here's what you could do to be cautious, but here's some opportunities that exist because of the market dip. And I was able to buy certain types of stocks that pay dividends and things like that. But I wouldn't have had access to those things had I not had a financial advisor. So if anybody has a question about a financial advisor or somebody to talk to, and even if you don't go with the person, because you're never under obligation, if you send me an email, and my email is in the channel description, send me an email, and then what I'll be able to do is send you his information and the web link and all that, so you can do the research and make your own decision. But I do recognize that it's important. I got another question in the chat from Next Chapter T9P. Hey, Next Chapter, hope you got my email. I like what you're doing on your channel. I'm just going to let everybody know that Next Chapter is a Untold Stories of Retirement, is a newer channel, and he's just talking to real people. Those of you that rock with me know that you rock with me because I give it to you straight up, no chaser. But he does the same thing, and he has some cool people on there. He has some really down to earth people. So I'm just gonna say, check out his channel. We're gonna probably do some work together because again, it's about trying to get people that may not have had access to the information, in the past to have information on the channel. But the question, and I know I'm doing a lot of talking, but it's my channel. Just kidding. It's what motivated me to retire early. And that's an interesting question. I could go into kind of the loaded piece of it, but at the end of the day, what motivated me to retire early was as I grew through my career, I was always a very ambitious person. And I started off as a recruiter in human resources and then became an HR generalist or whatever, and then kind of worked through. And there was a point where I got to the top of the career and realized that there's only so many other places that I could go. And if you're like me, a lot of times you'll go find another job just because you want to be excited about something because the job you have sucks. And so I just realized that I wasn't gonna get it, and I needed to do something different because at some point I was gonna become so cynical, I was gonna become so frustrated and so aggravated with giving up days out of my life to someone else who really didn't care about me as a person, and were more interested in the organizations that they worked for, that it wasn't gonna end up well, and I was gonna end up frustrated. So I had a conversation, my wife and we had a conversation with our financial person. And what's interesting is when we broke down all the numbers and we looked at our budget and we looked at our low levels of debt and all of those dynamics, he mentioned that you could retire and here's what it could look like. And here's based on what your spending is. And I had no idea that I would be able to do it earlier. I was thinking 4 or 5 years down the road where I'm some old cat somewhere and thinking, okay, I could retire because that's what old cats do. But I didn't realize that I was going to be able to do it sooner. So at that point, I had another 1,000 conversations with my financial guy because, like many of you, I really look at my numbers and try to understand, what's the risk and what's the problem and what are the potential downfalls. And he talked about all the levers. And then my wife and I just had a conversation, and my wife really balances me out because she'll ask me questions like, are you sure you want to continue trading your time for this aggravation that you're getting at work or for this frustration? Or would you rather have your time for yourself? And the answer is, I would rather have the time for myself. At the end of the day, when I sat back and I thought about it, if the money's good, then what's the motivation for me to continue to do that? And I also asked myself, I talk a lot on my channel about the uplifting the human condition in any way that I can as being my personal mission statement. Then I started asking myself, what is this holding me back from? What is my job holding me back from? And I decided, let me focus on the things that I really want to focus on that are going to bring me to life that I want to live. And that's what, when I think about what motivated me, it was really multi-pronged. Number one, being in a place where I can. Number two, realizing that I wasn't going to get the satisfaction that I needed if I continued working. Number three, it gave me the opportunity to really get out and change the world. And I've since started a YouTube channel, which I had no idea I was going to do. And I also had no idea was going to be as successful as it is. So I thank you, fam, for all your support and love and the stuff you give me in the comments, because it really is inspiring. But the master gardening stuff and being able to get out to underserved communities and looking at people that like us, and when I say like us, I'm talking about all of us, because the reality is we're all broke, we're all struggling, we're all striving, and having conversations that a lot of us just don't have at home because nobody's talking about money because we're too busy working, too busy trying to put bread, milk, and cheese on the table. And just sharing what I've, not just my experience, but what I've learned and some of the mind frames or mindsets that help me get there. So I hope that answers your question. Another question I got was, is that another question? Okay. My wife has helped me with the same frustration. Nice. You're out. When you have the opportunity, there's a transition that happens when you retire. And I'll tell you, most of us, and I'm just going to speak as a man. And I know that this is no disrespect to anybody else, but I was raised that I was supposed to be the one to take care of my family. I was the one that was supposed to hunt and gather. I was supposed to be the one to make money. And so not working was a big transition. But what I also learned is that the thing that I wasn't taught was I wasn't taught about giving myself grace and giving myself some space to grow into the new reality and understand that there's a lot of people that could benefit from what I have to provide to the world. And so just, when you go through that space and when you do hit that point where you're going to retire, give yourself that space, give yourself that grace, and allow yourself the opportunity to grow into that next phase of your life. Because retirement isn't the end. Retirement is the beginning of the next step. And it's you taking on the next step of what is it that you want to do? What's your contribution to the world going to be? Hey, we got Julio Blanco, longtime subscriber. Welcome back. I feel like I know all these cats, and I know all you cats, or catettes, as it were. And so it's nice seeing you all on the channel. So I'm glad you're still there, Mr. Julio Blanco. So let me read Julio's question. Big Sob, a two-part question from one of your day ones. How do you meet people to hang with in early retirement? And what do you tell people you do now? It's funny. That's a great question. I meet people kind of everywhere. The beauty of it is that when I walk into a room, people see me and always want to kind of figure out who is that guy, because I'm 6'8". So for the record, I'm the same size as I think Kobe Bryant, and I'm taller than Michael Jordan. So, and I think I'm LeBron size or something like that, but I'm not. I don't have all the muscle. But I have that going. But I also just open up conversations with people. It's funny, when I stopped working, I realized that I didn't have some of the hangups that I had when I was working, because I didn't have this status, I didn't have this perception, I didn't have to project anything in particular. I could just be myself. And so when I feel like talking, because I don't always feel like talking, you might see me on the street and I don't even look around, but when I feel like talking, I just say, hey, we start talking. I'm playing golf, and I just extend myself to people. I said, I realized that a lot of the people that I knew when I was working and I interacted with, in both personal and professional, they were people that I knew out of convenience, or as I like to say, I knew I was hanging with them because I had a particular time that I was able to hang with people and I felt like I had to do it. But now that I have the time of my own and I can do what I want to do whenever I want to do it, then I'm able to go out and just kind of be myself. And I've come to realize and really built a level of comfort, and that I may not necessarily be everybody's cup of tea, but those people that I am their cup of tea and they're my cup of tea, we deserve to be friends. And so I just kind of open myself up. If the conversations happen, I open myself up to that. I introduce myself to people. I'm playing golf with people. I'm making some friends in the Master Gardener program. And, again, not everybody deserves the same access to everybody, because some people, their whole reason for the season is to bring you down. And I don't mess with that. I identify that very quickly and I move on. But people that are there that are truly interested in becoming friends, I'm all open to it. So I just meet people that way. I put myself in situations where I may not necessarily always be comfortable. And I extend myself to the people in those spaces, because what I find is most of those people are in the same spot. And then the other question that came up is, what do you tell people you do now? I tell people I'm retired. It's funny, because I realize that most of the time when you tell people about yourself and they get put off, that has nothing to do with me. That's all them. And if I had the responsibility of controlling how everybody else feels about feeling bad about something I did that's positive, there's no way I can shoulder that responsibility. So when people say, well, what do you do now? I say, well, I retired a couple of years ago, but I'm a master gardener. I work out in the communities, and I try to do things to help help other people. And there's some people that are like, that's great. Some people look at me and say, you're retired? And some people, they get put off by it. But a lot of times what I find is people find that they want to retire and they hadn't put enough thought behind, or they're a couple years out from retirement and things like that. So I just figure at this point in my life, again, I go back to, I spent a lot of years of my life, particularly in the types of roles that I had, having to project and having to fit into a box. I don't do that anymore. I keep things 100 with everybody. And I just say, this is what it is. Because there's nothing that I do that's designed intentionally to hurt other people. So I hope that answers your question. Again, Julio, thanks for the question. As always, you're a thoughtful voice of reason, even when I go off the rails with some of the stuff. Another question that came up was, retire to do what? Most people that retire die within a few years. I'm just going to say it. I hear what you're saying, but I think that's bullshit. I think that, sometimes, we try to convince ourselves that retiring isn't something that we should do because we may not feel like we can do it or we're successful at it. But to say that most people die within a few years of retirement, I can't subscribe to that. I don't think the research says that. I think there are people that do, but I think there's a lot of people that are in bad health that are forced to retire. When I look at when I look at the people I've talked to that are working for the government, that are going through all the stress, that are getting laid off, people in Virginia and so on, those folks are an incredible amount of stress. And that stress has specific health outcomes on the people that are stressed out. And so that may happen in some of those cases. But do I think people are doing that? The answer is no. And again, there's no such thing as a bad question, but I think sometimes you could kind of gaslight something positive by a statement like that. So I don't think most people die, but I think you do have to have an idea of what it is that you want to do. What do you want to do? What is it? And I always ask people, what is it that you would want to do if you won the lottery? If you won the lottery, I'd go out and do this. I'd go out and do that. I'd go out and do this. I'd go out and do that. All right, then that's what you retire to. So why don't you set that as your reality? I think Jay-Z once said in a statement that, everybody's born with a genius level talent. And so the idea is figure out that genius level talent and build your world around that. And the reality is, most of us don't do that because most of us have to go to work and we have to do something, and we kind of take the jobs that we've got to take. This is I got MCM. I think was it MCM? It's not MCM from the Beastie Boys, but anyway. Sabado, been listening to you this year, trying to get myself ready for the next chapter. Would love to chat it up with you. One of the things that I do is I have the chats with Sabado. And you could send me an email, and my email is in the channel description. And then once we align on a time, and it's usually sometime that week or the following week, just depending on what the schedule's like, then we set up a Google Meet. You send me a Google Meet invite, and then we have a conversation for about an hour. And the reason I only go for about an hour is because I don't want anybody to pay for Google Meets to meet with me, and I think that the limit on it is an hour. So, but we can have a great conversation. Let's do it. Let's set it up. I'm looking forward to it. So when MCM 26.2 comes my way, then let's do it. The next question that I got that came up was, your story is inspiring. I can't believe some people were cold about your retirement. It's like they don't realize how much hard work goes into achieving that. What advice would you give someone facing similar reactions? The easiest way to deal with some of that is, again, you have to, once you retire, you start to find that it's easier to set boundaries, and you start to understand how much control you have over how other people impact you. And the reality is, some people are cold, some people react a different way. And a lot of times people do that because they can't do it, or because they don't understand it, or because of something that's going on with them. And I think once you realize that it's them and not you, then it's easier to kind of put that into perspective. Because I don't think people, now let me be very clear. I don't think people mean ill will. I don't think people are haters necessarily. I mean, there are haters out there, and haters will hate, but I don't think people are generally haters. I think sometimes, again, we're socialized. We're like, if you think about people that go to prison, right? And again, I've never been to prison and never trying to fake it. But imagine people that go to prison and they're in a situation for 20 years and it's a certain way, it's structured a certain way. Well, what happens is you get used to that structure. It's no different than work. You've been getting up at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock every morning. And I know somebody's going to say, I work shift work and I get up at 3 in the afternoon, but you get the idea. You've been doing the same thing for 30, 40 years. And it's hard to get your head around the idea that there is a reality that's different than that, because your reality, if you're like me, since you were 12 years old, is that you get up and you go to work. That's hard for people. And so a lot of times it's not that people are hating on you. They just can't get their head around the idea that you're not having to get up and go to work. So again, just like I talk about having grace on ourselves, you got to have grace with other people as well. Because if you don't allow yourself to have grace for other people, then you're just incredibly difficult on the rest of the world. I don't know that that's necessarily going to bode anybody well, because again, we can't control what we can't control. Or as Marcus Aurelius would say, we should be indifferent to things that don't make a difference. And so it kind of is what it is. So I've got a question from, I got a whole bunch of questions here. Okay, from Reggie Fouché about healthcare. And so just to talk a little bit about healthcare. Now, healthcare is a big topic in the circles of retirement, and it's becoming even more difficult right now. And again, I'm not going to get political. That's not my thing. But I think legislatively, there are some changes that are happening that are slated to happen unless Congress acts relative to the Affordable Care Act and the cost around that. But here's what I'm going to say is that healthcare, so my wife and I were fortunate enough to be able to continue on an employer-sponsored plan. So that puts us in a pretty good spot because we have the benefits of a large group plan, which helps manage the cost, just like when you have a job or whatever the case is. The majority of us with healthcare if you retire early, are going to have to bridge that gap. And there's a few ways you can do that. One of those, again, is the Affordable Care Act. And I think if you look at the Affordable Care Act and the subsidies don't get extended, I think what you're going to have to do is when you price out an estimated price of your insurance once you have your insurance, or if you were to get that insurance, and put that into your budget and invest that into an account, and maybe a healthcare savings account or an investment account. So that way you can have money put into a bucket that's growing, that's designed to help pay premiums over time. The other way, and I think somebody just put it in the comments, is that there are other organizations that give benefits to people that are working part-time. Now, I know, and somebody said in the comments one time, that if you're doing stuff part-time, or you're working, you're in this YouTube channel and all that, you're working, you're not retired. Folks, retirement is whatever you want retirement to be, because the reality is that you're in control of your time. And the question isn't about what you do with your time. The question is that you have a choice in what you're doing with your time. That's what retirement's about. And so, like, I spend more time on this YouTube channel, the Master Gardener stuff and everything else I'm doing, than I did at work. So now, here's my point, is taking on a part-time job or a side hustle or something like that that's going to pay you benefits is just part of the process. But I'll tell you what, I would rather go in and work 20 hours a week at Starbucks, dealing with people, maybe making coffee, taking in a couple tips, meeting people in the community, making friends, than go in and work 60 hours a week under a bunch of high pressure politics, work politics. So that's another option, is taking on a part-time job. And something else that somebody pointed out, there's a guy named Joe Kuhn, and his Joe Kuhn Loves Retirement. And he's really one of the people that helped me and gave me the confidence to build my channel when I first got started. But one of the things, so check out his channel, but one of the things that he mentioned to me was, or he mentioned on his channel, was there are organizations out there like the Farm Bureau. He's in Indiana. So the Farm Bureau has insurance plans that they offer, I guess, to general public. So there are avenues out there for health insurance, but you have to look for them. And a lot of it's going to depend on where you live. Places like California are going to be set up different than places like Indiana, which are going to be set up different than places like New York and so on. But that's something that you're going to want to take a look at sooner rather than later, because even for us, our retirement, our healthcare went up about 25-30% this year just because of the cost of rising healthcare costs. So it's a big thing, it's important, and it's one of the biggest risks in retirement. And I'd be remiss if I didn't talk also about long-term care insurance, because folks, as young as we feel, as much as we work out, we all have the risk of getting older and needing some type of care, whether it's in home or in a facility. So you should take a look at long-term care plans, and there's a bunch of different plans, and they don't cover everything, but they help offset some of the costs so it doesn't wipe you out completely when you get to that point, if you were to need it. And the plan that we have, for example, has a cash value. So again, these are things that if you want to go into detail, we can have the conversation with Sabado, and I could talk to you in specific detail about that. But so there's healthcare is a big deal, and I wanted to make sure that we took some time to go through that. Let me get back. It looked like there's some more comments here. It's Sonny G, I'm working on Mr. Sabado, here's one. Mr. Sabado, do you have a community of people you meet with a couple days a week? I have a community of about 4,000 people. I got you, fam. I talk to you, I share with you, and I read your comments, and I internalize a lot of those comments. But no, I don't have anybody specifically that I spend time with. One of the things that I've been really trying to do, and it's hard to do, and this is something that next chapter and I'm hoping we could start to do, is I've been really wanting to put together something that I call a perspective collective. Because, as much as a society, we all see ourselves as different, we're all dealing with the same shit. We're all dealing with rising healthcare costs, rising food costs. We're all dealing with being retired and trying to find purpose. We're all dealing with trying to figure out how to invest. There's all these things that we're trying to figure out, and we're all getting older. And so my idea is to bring together like a council of people that could just talk about stuff, so that way we could share it with other people in whatever medium, whether it's in conversations with the homies or if it's on the YouTube channel. And so my idea with the Perspective Collective is to get together just to have conversations, maybe once every couple weeks or once a month, and then so we could share that information. Because I'll tell you, one of the most powerful things that I've had the opportunity to do, again, I'm out in California, I'm on the left coast, but one of the things that I've been able to do in my chats with Sabado is I've met people from Virginia, I met people from Washington, D.C., met people from Southern California, met people from all across the country, and I'm able to get a firsthand account of some of the understandings that they have. And, it's one thing to hear about them in the news. It's another thing to hear about them in people's lives. And so when I share my perspective, as opposed to just me and Sabado, this guy from California that retired at 51, I'm able to take all of those experiences and take what I've learned from them, from you, and I do that in the comments as well, and then bring that back, because I think it's I think there's a collective us that, we grew up in places. And again, I don't know about most of you folks. I mean, most of you guys are probably rich and got it all covered, but I grew up broke in the hood, and my aspirations were either to join the military or work for UPS, but neither of those happened, and I ended up kind of applying myself in a different way and getting to this point. But I understand how difficult it is and how many people see you different, not because of what you look like, but because of where you live. That's a whole other story about that. So I just think I've been looking at doing something like that to bring people together. And if there's anybody that's interested in that, send me an email and we could get that set up, because at the end of the day, I think that we all have an obligation to help our fellow person. And I think my gift is to bring people together and to talk. And so I want to be able to use that. And other people are incredibly smart. Like, you get guys like Julio Blanco that take what I say and make me want to make another video to myself, because it's the way that he asked the question is just so down to earth and direct and poignant. But we all have different gifts is my point. So I just want to, I think that's going to be an opportunity to move things forward. So I like the fact that some of you out there have, Real Retirees Uncut is out there too. That's another one that kind of like Next Level, where he talks to people about, just interviews people. And again, if anybody ever wants to interview me, just make sure you got time, because I like to go. And I have one video where I do an interview with a guy that I know named Matt the mortgage guy, but he talks about the Get Better Everyday podcast. But if anybody ever wants to interview me, just let me know, because that's what I'm here for. I think that when I look at YouTube, I see all these people, and again, I have nothing against them, but I look at people like Rob Berger, I look at the money guys, I look at some Dave Ramsey, I look at all these people, and they're all financial people, and they're kind of these big personalities. And I might have a big personality. My wife tells me that all the time, but I'm a big dude. No, I'm just kidding. I may be a but I'm a down to earth dude. I'm just a regular guy. There's some people on the channel that know me and know that what you see here is what you see all the time. And I think that's what people really need to hear, really want to hear. And so and that's what channels like Real Retirees Uncut, Next Chapter, Retirees and all that's what they do. And I really like the fact that they do that, because what I think it really gives us all hope, because again, we're all normal people, and it's not always about retiring at 51. Sometimes it's being 65, and I've got 65, 70-year-old people that come to me with different types of perspectives about things they're dealing with, which are the same things that I'm dealing with, but it's nice because I can learn from them. So let me get into another question. Another one was, what was the hardest thing to let go? Constantly checking my phone for emails and network alerts and having specific expectations to meet. One of the hardest things for me is I've always been a very goal-oriented and a detail goal-oriented person. So in other words, I don't just want to do it, I want to do it right. And anybody that knows me knows I'm always on time. If I say I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And if I'm not, I always let you know that I'm going to do it. And so I think the hardest thing for me was just being able to allow myself to relax, not having to be on all the time. I always had to be on, because a lot of people required, not only was I the chief human resources officer, but I had thousands of people that looked at me to make sure they were okay. And because my personal mission statement is to uplift the human condition, I had a special responsibility to them, because if I have my own tribe, I can't take care of the rest of the world without taking care of my own tribe. And so I was always on it, trying to do it right, trying to get it 100%. And now I'm not at that place anymore. Now I've gotten to that place where I could just relax a little bit. I don't have to be on. I could just sit back, relax, let myself flow. Don't front like you heard, just act like you know. No, but and that was really hard, because getting up and checking emails and voicemails and answering the phone every time it rings, that's just who I am, and that's who I've always been. So it's been hard to let go of that piece, because now what I could do is I could just smell the roses, just appreciate and enjoy life in a way that I don't know that I was really able to do up to that point. I enjoyed what I was doing, but there was all the stuff on the peripheral that I wasn't able to engage in. A couple of other questions that I had is, when did I start investing? And again, we're going to probably go here for about I think we got a little bit of time, because it appears that we've still got stuff coming in. So, but how old was I? Did I have a Roth IRA? And the answer is yes. I started opening Roth IRA. So one of the things that I did when I was 22 years old, 22 and 23, for 2 years in a row, a buddy of mine, one of my closest friends, gave me books for my birthday. One of them was The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which helped me in crafting my personal mission statement, or understand the importance of crafting it. And another one was The 9 Steps to Financial Freedom. And I talk about these books in another video, but when I read The 9 Steps to Financial Freedom by Susie Orman back in, I don't know, it had to be 99, 98, something like that. It really helped me understand that things exist, which was really the precipice for this channel, is because a lot of us out there don't know certain things exist. So I want to make sure people know things exist. So what I was able to do was understand what investment did and how it worked. And so I opened up a Roth IRA. Now, as things go, I opened them up, and then when I wanted to buy a house, I'd cash it out, or I'd go broke, and then I'd cash it out, so on and so forth. So I had a bunch of fits and starts, and it wasn't until I was probably about 38. And I talk about it in today's video. So I recommend everybody watch today's video, because I go deeper than Atlantis on that one. But it wasn't until I was about 38 that I really kind of got my stuff together and said, I'm just going to focus and get after it. And I focused, got after it, and then here we are now. So so the answer is yes. I started when I was 22, fits and starts, but then I was about 38. So in contrast to the last question, what was the easiest thing to do in retirement? The one thing that the biggest thing that I got in retirement was capacity. I like to understand things, and I want to always be better, but I didn't always have time to understand how I could be a better friend, how I could be a better husband, how I could be a better colleague, how I could be a better whatever it is that I wanted to do. And what I got was that mental capacity, because I wasn't bogged down by all the work. One of the things that I'll tell you a funny story. I went to the doctor I think last month. Doctor told me, I told her, I said, I smoke cigars. She says, when you smoke cigars, there's a cumulative effect that impacts you over time, even though you're not inhaling. And I started thinking about that cumulative effect. Well, the reality is there is a cumulative effect of all of the stress and toxicity of work that builds up that you don't even see, that clogs up your ability to think about things that you're not thinking about on a regular basis. You would be surprised about how many things that you think about as a matter of routine, as opposed to original thought or just looking at things different than the framework that you're working in. And so now that I'm retired, I have the ability to do that. I have better boundaries with people that I need to have boundaries with. I have stronger relationships than I've ever had in my life. I have fewer relationships because I cleaned a lot of people out, but I have stronger relationships than I've ever had, because now I understand who are the people that are filling my cup and who are the people that are just taking drips out of the coffee can. So I think that, and just having more time to do things so I can do them right. I used to always, in every interview I had, every job interview I ever had, the question was, what's the biggest challenge you have? And my biggest challenge was I could never do anything right, because I'm doing a million things, but I want to be in a situation where I can do things right. I want to do things correct, because when you're doing a million things, you can't do them all right. So I hope that answers the question, but that's the one thing. Well, I guess it's two, but those are things that just got easier in retirement, because those are baseline things. The rest of it is just fluff and distraction. But the underlying piece is just having the capacity to really think about the world that I'm in, just to be a better citizen, a better American citizen, a better person, again, a better in-law. My relationship with my in-laws is better. My family, it's better. My wife and I are, we're like two peas in a pod. I always say it's like me and my girlfriend. And I shouldn't say that, because then my wife's going to think I have a girl. You know what? I'm not even going to go there. But you know what I'm saying? Me and my girlfriend. Anyway, all I need in this life of sin is me and my girlfriend. So those are the two things that got a little bit easier. And, so I'll go through a couple more questions. It doesn't look like there's many more in the chat, but I'll go through a couple more, because, again, I think these are questions that are on people's minds. Is how long before you retired did you hire a financial advisor? So it's funny, because I hired a financial advisor not thinking that I was going to be retiring early. I hired a financial advisor because I wanted to understand what my financial picture looked like and what it looked like. How was my saving impacting my life going forward? And so that was about, and again, I get these numbers wrong. Some videos I may say 7, some videos I'll say 10, because I'm kind of in this, but it's about 7-8 years before I retired, because what they did is they took out all the clutter, got us focused on the expenses and the budget, and put us on track and said, here's what you can do. And then as we move forward, we realize, because again, compound interest is a real thing. And what's beautiful is that we've had 10 years, I don't know, maybe a little more than 10 years. I don't know, what are we in 2026, just about? So from about 2012, we've been in economic recovery. So about a 14-year recovery. So the markets have been doing fairly decent, not great. They fell off in 2020, so I do recognize that. But the markets have been doing okay, and I think we're about to level out for a period of time. I don't think we're going to crash. We're not going to have depression, but but I wanted to understand what was the impact of all this, because I always knew saving was important. And so then once we did that, he helped us focus and get to where we are today. And we're grateful for him. And again, if anybody has any questions and wants to know who that person is or how to contact them, what I'll do is if you send me an email, I'll send you their information so that we can go to the website. Again, it's one of the bigger financial advising houses, and we do assets under management because I like the idea of being able to call somebody, have questions, as opposed to just trying to do it myself and then asking a couple questions. But again, different people have different perspectives. The Sonny G, SS Gunny G, sounds like a rapper. SS Gunny G's in the house, baby. Over your working career, did you spend a considerable time at one company, or did you change employers frequently? I always had, I was an HR guy, and it's funny because one of the things you learn in HR is you're behind the scenes in a lot of the conversations. And there's one thing that I learned is that you don't get rich working at one company, because that 3%, if you think about getting those 3 and 4 and maybe even 5% increases on a yearly basis, then you look at inflation, which baseline inflation is usually about 3%. You're actually falling behind when you work at one company. And so I found that the way that I was able to increase my salary was to not just change companies. I never changed for the sake of change, but I always grew. I always focused on, as Stephen Covey would say, sharpening the saw. So I'd learn a new skill set that would set me up for a job that was a little bit more responsibility, because by getting an additional responsibility, I was able to make a little bit more money. And so I didn't change frequently, but I made it a point. But what I did do, and I continue to do, I do this with friends, I do this with companies, is I look at everything like a contract. So I say every year I do an assessment. I do an assessment of the people that are in my cipher. I did an assessment of my jobs, and every year was an employment contract. And if the job wasn't meeting my expectations, then I would make it a point to start setting myself up to find another job. Because again, we look at jobs like they're doing us a favor, but really we're doing them a favor. I was reading an article yesterday, and they said one of the challenges with bringing all these factories back to America is that the talent pool may not be able to support it because there's not as many people. Baby boomers had a lot of kids. Gen X, not so much. So, and that's who would have to fill, the kids of the Gen X generation would have to fill it. So you go from having 6 kids to having 2.2 on average. That impacts the labor market. So again, it's those types of dynamics that we have to take a look at and understand that we're providing a service, and the biggest service we're giving is our time, because time is what it is. We work, we're labor. That's time and expertise, and the companies need that, because without the expertise, the company doesn't exist. So I always made sure that I looked out for myself as well as looked out for the organization. So when I was there, I was able to focus on giving expert service first time, every time, 100% of the time. Let me see. Another question. I'm going to read one more question here, and then I'm going to go to MCM. Then I'm going to think we're going to wrap it up, unless something else comes back in. Somebody says, I retired 5 years ago at 49. Should I make a YouTube channel? All the cool kids are doing it. Well, I can't say all the cool kids are doing it, because I'm not a cool kid. I just happen to be a YouTube channel. I'm just kidding. But, if you retire, one of the best things we can do is we all have these cliches that we use, but they all kind of say the same thing, kind of around the each one teach one. I would recommend anybody start a YouTube channel, because I'll tell you right now, my wife had been telling me for months, you should start a channel, you should start a channel, you should start a channel. I'm like, nobody wants to hear me talk. All I do is ramble all the time. And next thing you know, I get on a year later, I got 4,000 people that are rocking with me almost every week with a bunch of comments and a bunch of engagement. And I'm not getting rich off it. Trust me. I'm not doing this to get rich. I might make $100, $200. I think the most I made was $300 in a month. But but there's people who have somebody to listen to that may not have had somebody to listen to. I've got people in some obscure parts of the world. I've got people in the Netherlands. I've got people in Holland. Got people in Australia. And even though the framework is a little bit different, situation's still the same. And so I think that the whenever we have an opportunity to get out, they say each one teach one, or it takes a village, or whatever your operative statement is. I think we all have an obligation and an opportunity to help other people, because there's people that may not listen to me, but they listen to you. And at the end of the day, if your message is pure and your intention is pure and you're doing it for the sake of helping people, I think you should absolutely start a YouTube channel. It's easy. It's fun. You sit in front of the camera. The only thing I see is myself and your comments right here. And, and that's that. And, you can ask Julio, if you were there day one, and I know you were, cause I see your comments, you were, they started off pretty rough, but part of the creative challenge is getting yourself to a place where you're comfortable, where they're pretty steady. And so I'm pretty steady with most of it. So, all right, folks, we're at about 52 minutes and 31 seconds. So I think we're going to stop it here, but I just want to read one more comment, because again, I appreciate the fact that everybody kind of popped in and showed up. But it says, love your presentation and content. Thank you for this, me. When are you doing it again? So the last thing I would ask that you do is, number one, share it, like, subscribe. But then let me know. If you put in the comments that you want to see one of these fairly recently or fairly frequently, then let me know. I actually enjoy this. To keep it a buck with you, I actually enjoy this, having the contact kind of immediately. I'd rather have this than do videos every week, because I'm able to see what's on your mind. Because as much as I talk and as much information as I share, it's not really about me. It's about you. It's about helping each of you get to where it is that you want to be, based on what it is that you're trying to do. And so if these help you more, let me know. I'll do them once a month, or so on. But I'm gonna keep knocking you down with gems on Wednesday and Saturday every week. That's my job. So I think that's where I'm gonna stop now. But I do want to say, thank you. I know you could have been anywhere else in the world right now, but you're here with me, and I appreciate that. And again, like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and if there's ever a question that you have, send me an email. And I do want to make sure I put a plug in for some of the other channels I watch. One of them that I didn't mention until right now is Frank Talks Money. Frank is, really strong on personal accountability and eliminating excuses. And I find his stuff incredibly motivational. So again, there's a bunch of YouTube channels out there. Some are like mine, some aren't, but the ones that I mentioned, and I know there's a couple on here today. And again, a special thanks to Real Retirees Uncut. He reached out to me and we did some stuff together. And then next chapter, I'm looking forward to the email from you so we could get on and rock it. And then, but we'll keep it going. I'm not stopping till these wheels fall off, and I just got new tires, so it's all good. So, hey, on that note, have a good rest of your day, and I will talk to you soon.